At our most recent session, we invited state lawmakers to take questions from the public. One of the first questions was about nonprofits that rely on the federal funding that President Donald Trump is proposing be cut.
Kim Small, CEO of Signs of Hope, and Signs of Hope has been serving Southern Nevada for over 50 years, supporting victims of sexual violence and exploitation, specifically human trafficking. And as you're aware, earlier this week, a lot of nonprofits were thrown into a frenzy, those of us that receive federal funding. And so now we are being proactive, as we have always been. But I'm asking you, what does that look like if this should come again, which probably will, and how can you assist us that are in your community doing work to support those that are in need?
After Monday, one of the things we started asking every single agency is what percentage of your budget is federally funded? And I will tell you that 37%, over 30% of Nevada's budget is funded through federal dollars. That's just our state government. That doesn't include all of the various nonprofits that get federal funding to provide services to Nevadans. One of the nonprofits from Northern Nevada that also deals with domestic violence has a housing program to house women and children that's 100% funded by federal grants. And so we are talking about a real problem if these cuts happen, right? If these cuts to vital services happen, we are looking at a deficit of probably $8 billion that we're going to need to fund programs. I mean, we're talking about, think about it, veterans programs, right? We're talking about housing programs. We're talking about, I know they mentioned that maybe Medicaid isn't going to be included, but Medicaid portals froze and weren't allowed to accept money. So we're talking about 800,000 Nevadans who get their health care from Medicaid. We're talking about women and children who, use WIC, the Women and Children program. We're talking about SNAP. So all of these are going to be in jeopardy. These are cuts for Nevadans, like services that Nevadans depend on to live.
And Kim, your question was, what are they going to do if that funding ends up not continuing to come? Do you have an answer to that at this point?
I mean, we're going to have to look at our budget because we won't even have enough money to fund budget. And I will tell you that, as Democrats, some of our priorities are making sure public education is funded and healthcare is funded, but we're going to have to look at programs that might not have the money.
Okay. Assemblywoman Gallant, would you like to add anything?
I mean, so domestic violence is a really important issue. It's something I've actually worked on since I was in college. I have a mental health background. That's where I started out, was working with groups of women in domestic violence areas. And I know how much of a struggle it is when it comes to funding and grants. I sat on the board for Safe House for 8 years, which is similar to what you guys do. And I live right down the street from St. Jude's in Boulder City now, so I'm a big supporter of that. So I think, there are state funds, right? I mean, like you guys have the VOCA with the marriage license. And so honestly, I know this pause is very scary, and I believe by February 10th is when the department heads need to come in and sort of do an audit and say, like, what are the essential and the important services? And I think at that point, we'll have a better idea about if or how much of assistance we need to work on here at the state level in order to support organizations like yours.
My question really comes as a graduate of university now, and then being born and raised here in Las Vegas, I've had a privilege to go to public school, zone school, magnet school, as well as private school. I was happy to see bipartisan legislation passed for increasing school funding, right? We now spend on par or more than more educated state counterparts per pupil, and our teachers, some of the most well-paid teachers in the country, right? So why do we consistently rank lowest in education? What are those states doing, like California, like Massachusetts, that we're not doing here at home?
I'm very, very fortunate that every single session that I've served at the legislature, we've sent more money to public education than the session before. And last session, we sent historic money to public education, $2.3 billion, right? And so I'm proud of that. But you hit the nail on the head, right? We need more transparency. We need more accountability, right? We need to do something to make sure that we're sending the money and that our schools are succeeding. And Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro is actually introducing a bill, the Education Accountability Bill, which is aimed to do just that, right? We've done a lot. We created an Education Accountability Subcommittee, a subcommittee of interim finance, to bring the Clark County school districts before us so that we can ask them questions about how they're spending the money. Last session, we passed a bill to order a forensic audit of the Clark County School District, which hasn't been completed, but you better believe once it does, I bet you we're all going to be nose deep in that and reading it and making sure that they are, resolving the findings. But now the Senate Majority Leader is introducing the Education Accountability Bill, which is going to create an oversight board that will also have enforceable tools within their disposal, and that's something I'm really excited about.
Do any of you know whether that's what other states are doing that have led to their success with the same amount of pay as he brought up? Any thoughts on that or knowledge of that, Assemblywoman Gallant?
Well, I mean, you take a look at some other states that are on par with the spending, and a lot of them have, a handful of them also have school choice or some form of it. And so it allows for more options for parents in an environment that's going to be more conducive to maybe that student's learning style. But I also think that it's not a spending issue, right? I mean, we definitely have some issues here in Nevada in terms of like just the systemic problems in our schools. I also think that we probably need to be a little less stringent and more supportive of growing our charter school districts. I mean, they run, their teachers don't get paid as much. They unfortunately were not included in the pay raises last session. I'm hoping that they will be included this session, but they have less per pupil spending, yet their test scores are higher across the board because their infrastructure, their system works. And our public school system is struggling. I think one of the other issues that we run into is that there's Title I schools where the funding incentives is sort of screwed up. So these Title I schools, they've got kids that might have some extra needs, but if their scores are low, they get more money. Their teachers get paid more money. So it's almost like you're getting rewarded for having lower test scores rather than getting rewarded for having higher test scores. Human nature is what it is. We're going to keep doing the behavior that we get rewarded to do, whether it's good or bad.
The main issue I wanted to address is something I haven't heard talked about here and is extremely important in my neighborhood, and that is homelessness. I have an entire file on my phone of just people that I have taken pictures of within a short walk from my house that are experiencing homelessness. For a few months, 18 years ago, I was homeless, so I have great empathy for these folks. But something has got to be done. We've actually called paramedics for people that have passed out in front of our house. There have been so many people, and I've talked to them, and these are real people, and I think a lot of people don't look at them as real people. But the status quo is unacceptable. I had our commissioner, Tick Siggerbloom, he actually came to my house because I had to show him some of the RVs that we could not get off the street.
So I think, addressing homelessness it has to be a multifaceted approach. And one of the main issues that we have to address is figuring out the underlying causes. I think that in recent years, we've learned that a lot of people are struggling with mental health problems and with substance abuse problems and addiction. And so, again, we're going to go back to the conversation we started with funding and ensuring that that we have the funding available to provide services. And I think that we have seen in other communities where the services are funded to provide people with options and to provide them with alternatives to homelessness. They take advantage of those opportunities. And so we're working in Nevada on continuing to invest in our public and behavioral health system. We're working on investing in opening up more beds in the facilities that treat people who have mental health problems or who are experiencing a mental health crisis. We've been working on setting up a crisis line in Nevada, a 988 number that people can call that does not produce a police response, but produces kind of like a mental health first aid or a mental health first responder who can. And so we have the number set up, but we're still working on funding the crisis response teams and the crisis response centers and having a place where, once an ambulance or right now it's a volunteer, once somebody is deployed to a place like your neighborhood to interface with someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, they have to have somewhere where they can take them, somewhere that, and we have to be able to do this in a way that is responsive to the community, because I think that, where you live, they're not going to respond well to police officers coming in with lights and sirens. They need a different kind of what we call a warm handoff. Somebody who is going to take them in a normal looking car to a place where they can sit down inside, especially in the heat, where they can have a glass of water and someone will talk to them like a human being and figure out what's going on and what can we do for your crisis today. And not just today, but tomorrow and the day after, and what kind of services do we need to connect you to? What kind of services do you need long term? And so that's something that, I've been working on for, since I started in the legislature back in 2018, developing these crisis response centers. And it is a slow moving process to get all of the pieces into place. But I think that today it's more important than ever.
I know that the sheriff has talked about the possibility of installing red light cameras to try to catch all these people who are running red lights, and it's a daily thing. I lived in Alameda County for 16 years, and Fremont, where they have cameras and they seem to work, and also one of the neighboring cities, Union City, had cameras, and they actually took them out because they weren't working. So are we talking to other jurisdictions about that, try to get an idea of, what works and what doesn't?
So we have worked with delegations or legislators from other states. We have worked with some national organizations on traffic safety. Again, I chair the Judiciary Committee, and so a lot of traffic, in addition to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, a lot of traffic laws come through my committee. And we have been trying to figure out what we can do to increase road safety and to decrease these pedestrian collisions especially. And we've had so many conversations about traffic cameras, including red light cameras. And I'm confident in saying right now that the data is mixed on whether or not they are effective. And we've also been talking so much today about government spending. I think this is, an excellent example of the kind of debate that we have in the legislature, because generally those traffic cameras are run by private corporations and it is a money-making operation for them. So we as a government today, if somebody writes you a ticket for running a red light and you pay a $250 fine, that full $250 goes to the government. It might be split between the city and the county and the highway fund, but it all goes to the government. When you put a red light camera in there, you start paying $10 of every $250 fine to the red light camera company. And so is that how we want to spend our money? As Nevadans, do we want to pay a third-party corporation to get rich off of Nevadans who are running red lights? I don't think so. I'm not sure if that was obvious or not. But those are the kinds of conversations that we have. And so I do have a bill, a traffic infrastructure bill, that does a small thing to increase traffic safety by increasing the width of a crosswalk and by increasing the buffer zone outside of crosswalks. And that has been studied on a national level to show that when you don't have cars within 20 feet of a crosswalk, you have fewer collisions when people are utilizing that crosswalk.
When it comes to the traffic cams, this is one issue that both Democrats and Republicans equally do not like. For various reasons, right? But we also do like the idea of reducing traffic crashes, right? And fatalities within these intersections that seem to be problems. I've had a lot of discussion with Metro about this and Sheriff McMahill. So one of the things that I said, I will consider this, provided that we can actually prove that it works. So maybe pick 20 intersections over the next 2 years to show that it's actually reduced these traffic fatalities and these accidents. My other request was that I did not want this to be a moneymaker for the state. So the hard costs of the cameras are funded by those private companies, but then anything above that would definitely go to the police department, right? And I don't want them to be incentivized. So my request is that any of that extra money would actually be given out to vouchers to various bars or establishments to be able to do Ubers or cab drive for anybody that's drunk so that they can get them home safely.
Yeah, Yeah, I think this is one issue we can all agree on. I mean, I'm open to the discussion. Like, that's what we do. We hear arguments, right?
Yeah.
And then we take in the information and make decisions. But one of the things I also do is reach out to my district to find out. And I will tell you that my constituency, I mean, they are well informed that, like, this is the way the government's trying to make money. Like, we don't want this in our district, so.
Or Big Brother's watching
yeah.
us. That's what I keep hearing. So people are nervous about that. So I think it's worth looking into, but I just think that they need to prove proof of concept.
A thank you to State Senator Melanie Scheible, Assemblywoman Sandra Jauregui, and Assemblywoman Danielle Gallant for their participation.